This is my first time using a microphone, so bear with me. When we think about the oeuvre of Stephen King, there are some novels that stand out more than the rest. While we might not all have read his most popular novels, they are still a part of our cultural zeitgeist. They are unavoidable. Who else remembers the Sonic Boom Misery episode? Just Simon and I? Okay, that's fine. Of all of his repertoire, Stephen King has named a couple of specific books that have caused him issues in the past. He mentioned he had to take a break while writing Pet Sematary because it scared even him. The Shining is a particularly bleak novel written to work through his own fears as he entered fatherhood. And it has that one scene that everybody mentions when they don't have anything more interesting to say. However, there's only one book that Stephen King himself had pulled from print. One book that he saw as gasoline to firebugs. Rage, or Getting It On as it was also known, was one of the Bachman books published in 1977. In the decades that followed its publication, there were several school shootings that eerily resembled or were connected to the killing spree of Charlie Decker. I have had a fascination with this specific book and its history for a really long time. I'm a pretty big Stephen King fan, and I've read a significant portion of his bibliography, not everything, but I do my best. But Rage is one that I have had on the back burner for a long time. Every time I reach for it, every time I feel like now's the right time to read it, there's another news story that just makes me feel icky about the whole thing. Even after I just recently read it, I couldn't rate it. I couldn't give it a however many out of 5 because it felt wrong. When I finally did cave and read it, I read it in 2 sittings over my lunch break at work. This video is going to be a little less produced than some of my other essays. I'm trying to work with some new software, and I really just wanted to get back into the whole thing. I really have to give some flowers to May Leitz. Shout out to the queen herself. Her last video on perfectionism killing creativity really was the kick in the ass that I needed. So shout out to you, Diva. You're the real one. Let's talk about Rage. The short and sordid tale of young high school student Charlie Decker starts with math class and a squirrel. The book is told from Charlie's perspective, and we can tell immediately that there's something not all the way there about Charlie Decker. He's distracted from the class, and he can't even really focus on the squirrel either. And just like how the squirrel is running from where the lawn meets the school, Charlie's mind is also running back and forth. An intercom message from the school principal pulls Charlie out of his reverie. He's called to the office to discuss his recent suspension. Charlie, a few months prior, had assaulted his chemistry teacher to the point of near death. As such, he's been required to meet with his school counselor and his principal on a regular basis to avoid total expulsion. And although this is a preferable punishment to total expulsion, Charlie still hates going to these meetings. Their conversation slowly devolves into an argument, and after repeatedly insulting the principal in the most exact ways that you possibly can, Charlie's a true teenager. He knows exactly what you're insecure about, and he's going to point it out. Eventually, the principal caves, and Charlie is expelled right there in the meeting. Here we see a little peek into Charlie's philosophy and Charlie's way of navigating the world. I gave him every chance. I waited for him to charge out and grab me, all the way to the staircase. I didn't want salvation. I was either past that point or never reached it. All I wanted was recognition, or maybe for someone to draw a yellow plague circle around my feet. He didn't come out, and when he didn't, I went ahead and got it on. Charlie exits the principal's office hoping to be confronted, hoping to be seen and not just dismissed, not just stamped and sent off like a number. When this doesn't happen, Charlie goes to his locker, sets it on fire, and grabs his father's gun that he had stolen earlier in the day. Instead of leaving the school after this, Charlie goes back to his math class, opens the door, and shoots his teacher, Miss Underwood, point blank. Here is where the meat of the novel really begins. Charlie has hostages. Now what? Charlie admits to himself and to the other students he really doesn't know why he's doing this. The confusion he feels right from the beginning of the novel isn't alleviated when he takes his first shot. In a way, like he had hoped the principal would chase him down and see him, he has chased down these hostages. And now that he has a captive audience, he doesn't really know what he wants to say. It doesn't take long for the students to start relating to Charlie. They see themselves in him and they begin to sympathize with him. Charlie shares stories about his life, about his relationship with his abusive father, his relationship with his mother, his sexual fantasies and experiences, and the other students begin to join in the sharing circle, unwillingly and willingly. The classroom becomes a bit of a therapy session with a corpse as a centerpiece. Slowly, Charlie and his hostages begin to find a purpose in this whole event. They turn on popular jock Ted Jones. Their mission is now to knock Ted down a peg. It's illustrated through one of the students, Irma, getting up to use the washroom and then returning to the class of her own volition, that the students could all leave at any point in time. They're not really being held hostage, all except Ted. Here, I think, is where the story moves into sheer fantasy, at least for me. Back when school shootings were all but unheard of, when this novel was written, the idea that students wouldn't feel threatened or frightened or traumatized by Charlie was, I suppose, possible. But now, with the fear of school shootings looming over every student and the history and knowledge of survivors and those who have unfortunately been victims, this becomes less and less of a reality. We know what happens in these situations. And I might be getting ahead of myself here, but there aren't really any Irmas in school shootings. There's only Teds. The novel ends with Charlie and the other students brutalizing Ted Jones using various classroom staples. No pun intended. The students leave Charlie and Ted alone in the classroom, and Charlie tells Ted that he can move on from this. This isn't the end. He can recover before he attempts to commit suicide by cop. As the chief of police enters into the room, he shoots Charlie. But Charlie doesn't get his last wish. He survives, and he's put in a mental hospital. This book was originally written during Stephen King's own high school years, as were most of the Bachman books. It's a work of fiction he used to express an internalized rage. A theme that shadows over the novel is that of misplaced aggression. King put his aggression into writing, and Charlie put his aggression into the gun. Charlie has a lot of people he blames for where he ends up at the end of the novel. He blames his principal for not coming after him. He blames his father for abusing him. He blames his counselor for treating him less like a person and more like a number. He blames the bullies for making him the way that he is and making him react the way that he does. But in the end, the only person who pulled the trigger was Charlie. In real school shooting cases, most famously Columbine, there was a lot of talk about blame. Were the perpetrators abused at home? Were they bullied at school? In 2018, a Toronto man ran his vehicle through a crowd, killing 11 people. The initial police interview for this event was homework I had to do when I was doing my forensic psychology course at university. I didn't finish that, but I did do this homework. In this interview, the way the perpetrator speaks, he is blaming anyone and everyone for why he did what he did. He was an incel, self-admitted. He blames the Chads and Stacys of the world for why he feels so dejected. He isn't getting what he's owed, so of course he had to commit some sort of heinous, abhorrent act. He feels justified in his actions. To quote a raccoon, "We've all got dead people. We all have problems. Some worse than others. But not all of us become Charlie." I think the narrative does a good job of not idolizing Charlie. We see his trauma, we see his troubles, but none of it justifies the violence to no meaningful end. In the case of the Columbine shooters, we have journal entries and videos and accounts of them feeling dejected. They had friends and they had bullies. They had extreme ideas about the world, and they also had normal high school ideas about the world. If we look close enough at anyone who has committed an abhorrent act, you can see the why. We can see the abusive father. We can see the abusive mother. We can see the overbearing person in their lives that may have helped create this time bomb. We can see a bully, but in the end, An explanation isn't an excuse. And most of us have bullies, and most of us aren't killers. One of the points King makes in Guns, an essay written in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook shooting, is that time is a great reliever. How he felt as a teenager while writing Rage was a seemingly insurmountable amount of frustration. At that point in your life as a teenager, you are so deeply feeling and yet so deeply lacking in perspective. Luckily, King was able to find a creative outlet to express his frustration. Not everyone does. When Charlie tells Ted that he can recover from this, ironically, Charlie could have also, if he hadn't decided to take that first shot. In hindsight, it wasn't worth it. I didn't say I was sorry. It happened because I got big enough. That was all. None of it changed anything. Now I wish it was him I'd killed. If I had to kill anyone. This thing on the floor between my feet is a classic case of misplaced aggression. All throughout the hostage situation, Charlie is communicating with adults on the outside. They ask him what it is he wants in exchange for releasing the kids. They offer him deals, they play along with his game, and they play along with his mood swings. But as we mentioned earlier, not even Charlie knows what he wants. When we see issues of violence among teens, in particular in less affluent areas, blame is often put on the type of kid who is perpetuating the violence. But this is dishonest. Teens with more resources can explore emotion, especially very heightened emotions like anger, in healthy outlets. They have sports, they have music, they have art that's more accessible to them than children in other areas. If a kid is surrounded by a cycle of aggression perpetuated by a lack of resources, they're not afforded those same opportunities. There's no type of kid that's more or less likely to commit a violent act. It's circumstances. They play an important role. In the novel, Charlie Decker comes from a lower income household. His mother and father have an unstable relationship, and he in turn has an unstable relationship with his mother and his father. He's not able to find outlets to work through his anger and to work through his confusion. And although I agree that misplaced aggression and a lack of creative outlets for teens is a part of the equation, I feel there's something missing. Alongside misplaced aggression is misplaced responsibility. One of the phrases that I heard a lot growing up was, "You are responsible for your own actions." This was usually flung in mine or my siblings' way when we were trying to deflect blame, trying to shirk responsibility, saying it was his fault, he started it, I shouldn't get in trouble for what I did. And although maybe there was some justice in breaking my brother's connects after he decapitated my Ken doll, at the end of the day, all we were left with was broken toys. For Charlie, he is consistently deflecting. He's musing on all the wrongs and all the ways the world has wronged him. And he is right. His father was abusive. He did wrong him. It was wrong for the bullies to bully him. It was wrong how the school counselor treated him. However, his retaliation is extreme, and his retaliation is cowardly. Charlie isn't in any immediate danger. After an incident with his father, we see that he's able to defend himself against the biggest threat in his life. He isn't forced to act through fear of violence or for survival. He acts out of rage for facing consequences that he feels are unfair. He escalates. The issue begins with the assault on the chemistry teacher. Then he presses further until he's expelled, and then he presses further until he shoots his teacher and then another teacher who is trying to warn them about the fire. But the thing with school shootings, more than any other form of mass violence, is that they're perpetrated by cowards. Gang violence, interpersonal violence, violence based in passion or in necessity, this isn't that. The name of the novel is almost ironic. Charlie was motivated by rage. That rage was based in cowardice. There's a social and psychological theory coined by Albert Bender called moral disengagement. This is the phenomena wherein a person justifies immoral behavior in themselves they would otherwise find deplorable in others. Some mechanisms of this might be displacement of responsibility or diffusion of responsibility. Displacement would be when a person engages in an action they understand is immoral, but a figure of authority is accepting of and willing to take responsibility for. A soldier following orders and killing an innocent may be able to displace that responsibility because they have an authority figure or structure that will face the consequences for them. As for diffusion, This occurs in group settings where an individual doesn't feel the need to take responsibility for something if there are enough other people who could also be taking that responsibility. This is kind of like the bystander effect. Why should I feel responsible for being a good steward and not littering if all my neighbors litter? You're diffusing that responsibility. Another mechanism is advantageous comparison. And this is where you compare and contrast your action to the benefit it serves or to a much worse action. Yeah, I stole from the petty cash at work, but Simon's been kiting for months, and that's much, much worse. These are mechanisms wherein I could quote Mama Deb or Papa Joe. You are responsible for your own actions. When he looks back at his actions, he isn't sorry he committed murder. He's sorry he killed the wrong person. He deflects and he thinks, oh, maybe if I had just killed my father, things would have been better. Had he killed his father, he may have felt sorry the other way around. There's no real regret. There's no real remorse. The connecting factor between someone so disengaged is the if only blank, things would have been different. I recently read Osama Desai's No Longer Human. One of the things that really struck me was how Yozo, the main character, was simultaneously aware of his wrongdoings, but never aware enough to take responsibility or accountability for how those actions impacted those around him. He can recognize he's harming other people. He can recognize when he himself is being harmed, but he can't really see the correlation between his actions and the harm they're doing to other people, if that makes any sense. Part of what makes Yozo feel so, as he says, inhuman is his inability to accept accountability. When a person disengages from how their actions impact those around them, they stumble into what's called antisocial behavior. For some, they do this knowing full well the harm and the damage they're going to do, and maybe they even relish in it. For others, maybe for Charlie, he's disengaging by turning away from accountability and deflecting all blame to those around him. As mentioned in the intro, rage was connected to several real school shootings. Mostly tangentially, not directly, but enough that it raised concern for readers and for King himself. I'll give you the names of the schools and the years, but the perpetrators don't deserve their names repeated. The No Notoriety Act is something definitely you should look into, especially if you consume a lot of true crime or if you produce true crime. It's not an exhaustive list as well. There were more, but these were the ones that I wrote down. In 1988, San Gabriel High School, the shooter mentioned they were inspired both by the hijacking of Flight 422 and by King's Rage. In 1989, Jackson County High School, a copy of Rage was found in the shooter's bedroom after the incident. In 1993, East Carter High School, the shooter wrote an essay on Rage and had gotten a poor grade. In 1997, Heath High School, a copy of Rage was found in the shooter's locker, mirroring the gun that Charlie had in his locker. Now, it's important to make the distinction between Rage being banned and Rage being recontextualized. Stephen King allowed the book to go out of print. This wasn't an easy task because Rage was part of an omnibus collection of Bachman books. I think this one also had The Long Walk in it. So it had some pretty popular books. It was difficult for his publishers to have to redo everything to be able to re-release the other books while preventing Rage from being a part of that omnibus. In addition, following the tragedy at Sandy Hook, as mentioned above, King wrote Guns, an essay wherein he explained his reasoning for removing Rage from shelves. According to The Copycat Effect, written by Lauren Coleman, I also apologized for writing Rage. No sir, no ma'am. I never did, and I never would. It took more than one slim novel to cause shooters to do what they did. These were unhappy boys with deep psychological problems, boys who were bullied at school and bruised at home by parental neglect or outright abuse. My book did not break shooters or turn them into killers. They found something in my book that spoke to them because they were already broken. Yet I did see Rage as a possible accelerant, which is why I pulled it from sale. You don't leave a can of gasoline where a boy with firebug tendencies can lay hands on it. Charlie's abusive father may be in part to blame for his eventual murderous actions. He taught him violence. He threw fuel on the fire of his son's aggression. He traumatized a child who in turn traumatized other children. As King says, it happens again and the whole thing starts over. However, Carl Decker didn't pull the trigger. Charlie Decker did. King didn't pull the trigger. The shooters did. Reading through Guns nearly 13 years since its publication is a frustrating experience. It speaks to such a bold-faced truth that's so painfully still our reality. I have nothing against gun owners, sport shooters, or hunters, but the weapons noted above are not used to shoot skeet or kill deer. If you use a Bushmaster on a deer in anything but single shot mode, you turn the poor thing into hair-covered meatloaf. Semi-automatics have only two purposes. One is so owners can take them to the shooting range once in a while, yell yeehaw, and get all horny at the rapid fire and the burning vapor spurting from the end of the barrel. Their other use, their only other use, is to kill people. King doesn't condemn the pro-gun, don't tread on me, red-blooded Americans in this 19-page essay, but he does point out some of their hypocrisy. Guns don't kill people, but people with guns do kill people. It isn't an issue of total gun removal, but rather gun restriction. What they're doing is plugging their ears and yelling, "I can't hear you," instead of listening to possible not complete solutions, but alleviations to potential death. An ongoing debate in the US is the right to bear arms and the potential overreach of government when they wish to limit or restrict gun ownership. This debate is deeply rooted in the US Constitution and in the Second Amendment in specific. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, it's important to note, as many people have in the past, that this was written before the invention of automatic or semi-automatic weapons. This is in reference to flintlock guns, guns that require quite a bit of prep to shoot. There's no risk of private citizens spraying a room of school children. As firearm technology evolved, naturally the private citizen would try to keep up with the military, not wanting to fall behind and the free state be at risk. According to the Constitution, they have every right to bear arms for protection from other citizens as well as protection from the government. And it is understandable to be concerned about government overreach. A fear of losing the free state, a fear of losing all power to partake in a rebellion should that be necessary. I don't think, however, that guns are the thing the US citizen needs to be concerned about losing. Not right now. The current administration has been pushing against education, university, social programs. I don't think it's a black and white issue of guns or no guns, regardless of my own personal distaste for them. I do, however, think the bigger issue isn't the government treading over your right to bear arms. I would be more concerned with the way nearly every other amendment is being tread over. If you are so stuck on the Second Amendment, you lose the other 26. When you're being distracted by politics and manufactured outrage, you don't see the things being done behind the curtain until it's too late. The American government has children in holding cells and encampments, children who were born in the US. They've stripped funding from public schools, limiting education for all children, but especially those in underprivileged areas. They've deflected and protected people who have assaulted children, as seen through the Epstein files. They've placed such intense restrictions on healthcare that women and girls are dying in hospital waiting rooms and in parking lots from completely preventable and also non-viable pregnancies. The American government has displaced and diffused responsibility. They blame minority communities for what's happening on their front lawn. But it wasn't trans people who were on that island. And it wasn't immigrants shooting school kids. They want you to be distracted by the squirrel outside the school window. So distracted you don't see the gun in Charlie Decker's flaming locker. I watched them. There was nothing. I was afraid it wouldn't come, couldn't come. So tight, so frozen, all of them. When you're 5 and you hurt, you make a big noise unto the world. At 10, you whimper. But by the time you make 15, you begin to eat the poisoned apples that grow on your own inner tree of pain. It's the Western way of enlightenment. You begin to cram your fists into your mouth to stifle the screams. You bleed on the inside. Thank you for watching.